everyone. Thank you for joining in today. Welcome to another episode of Conversations of Change. Today, we have Avani Parekh with us. From the desert salt pans of Gujarat, rural North Carolina, to the world of Web 2 and now Web 3, Avani Parekh is a community builder standing at the intersection of tech and empathy. She is super passionate about women's communities and creating safe spaces for the most marginalized. She was last at Meta, supporting community leaders around the world through their coaching, programs, and certifications. But in the post pandemic world, she craves to build spaces where we can connect in real life. She loves learning what makes others' hearts sing. Hello, Avni. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Soumya. Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you, and we are super excited to have this conversation. How do you approach building these safe spaces in the digital realm, and how do you envision transitioning and adapting them to real life situations, especially in this post-pandemic world?
Yeah, this is such a deep question. It's one that I'm currently navigating. So I don't think I have a definitive answer. But for me, I always follow, firstly, the golden rule, right? Is treat others the way you want to be treated. And it always starts with one-on-one conversation. So any community building exercise, when I'm starting a community or building one on my own, has been having personal conversations with people and pulling them into the fold. The second part has always been transparency around decision making and allowing people to step up and take leadership roles if they would like. Some people want to be super involved, some people want to watch from the sidelines and give opinions, some people want to just take part in something, and so you have to ascertain what part people want to play. But Soumya, you recognize like a little bit of neurodivergence in yourself. I have ADHD. I'm not a good implementer. If you give me a task that like I have to do 50, I have to do think some one thing 50 times, I will get distracted and it will not happen. So I know that about myself. And so having like co-founders in community has been super important. And those early adopters, those are really great YouTube video. Everyone that's watching, watch this YouTube video. It's called Leadership from a Dancing Guy. It's super old. The video will look like it's the oldest thing on YouTube. It's probably about 16 years old at this time, but it's one of the coolest examples of leadership theory and movement building that I can't ever forget that lesson. And they talk about movement building and they really say that, there's the person who founds, but then the most important person is the first person that goes and dances next to the crazy person at the concert. That person is key. Once you get that person, it becomes less risky for other people to join along. So finding like your first 1 or 10 or 100 is sort of like the next part of the game, and that's when sort of this inner group, this inner circle that wants to be involved comes into play, where they're inviting friends and family, or they're putting out the word, you're sharing with people about what you want. I failed to mention this because it's so ingrained, but I have been burned by this. That inner core group of people being on the same page about what the space is about, and what are some of the core values and tenets that you hold. How do you want people to behave when it is really important. I have just started spaces without defining those things first, and then it became messy and murky later. So doing that with that core team is really important, and that's how you start. If you're adding value in a space that you create, then other people will join. And if you're thinking about this idea of inclusion and safety, you have to make sure that whoever's decision making, whoever's sort of at the leadership helm, looks like the community that you are serving, the community that you're bringing into the space, and that you constantly allow for that transparency with the larger community too, right? Here's our leadership team, here's how we make decisions, this is what goes on. Because I've mainly used tools like Facebook groups. If you have a Facebook group, if someone submits a post in a Facebook group, there is a feature that lets you decline a post or a comment and give feedback and even tag a rule in the group. And so using those types of tools to make sure that people understand, like, hey, this is why we're not allowing this, like, whatever. And I think lastly, that that line from digital to in real life, I mean, typically it's the other way around. Increasingly, it's becoming digital to in real life. Can happen in interesting ways. Empower people to meet each other. So a couple of my friends are now starting tools where they have startups where they're tools of community building within community. So essentially, if you and I are in like a digital space together, we're in a WhatsApp group together, but like basically every day there's chatting or whatever. But I'm looking for someone that understands, like I'm looking for a job. And I'm looking for a job that aligns with my values. And you are this person who runs your own community on feminist careers and self-affirming careers, then tools like that can help us find each other. So I think like using tools like that to build micro communities is really important. So there might just be the two of us. Maybe the two of us are in Delhi or Bangalore. We can meet for a coffee. So it's not necessary that you have to do these big events, but if you could help people find each other one-on-one, that's oftentimes really important. And recognizing and celebrating the differences. There are ways to rule community with iron fist because I said so. There are ways to recognize that everyone's going to have a different opinion, and you can state those opinions, but you need to be respectful. I think that's also important in inclusion, especially around things like political lines or religious lines, right? Because everyone has a feeling about what is right. Truth is very subjective in these types of conversations. That can also be important. So those would sort of be like my core ways of dealing with that. I no longer feel like in real life needs to be a whole group of people. And in fact, I was speaking with a group of community builders, like we're all in a WhatsApp group together. And more of us sort of said, I really crave for just those one-on-one or small intimate spaces versus like, boom the mall, get 10,000 people in a convention center, which is what in real life used to be. And post-pandemic, I think that fatigues a lot of us, and you never build deeply in those spaces. You never connect deeply in those spaces. Even if you're networking or talking, it's very hard to get to that deep conversation. And for people that crave like that soul connection, you want to feel it in your chest. That one-on-one or one to a small group can be really nice. So I really like that. I had a community partner. They were actually a faith-based organization. They were a religious organization, and they would have a live streamed religious discourse every Sunday. That was their schedule, and so there would be tons of people in the comments like, "Hi, I'm new, I'm new." So they did this ritual where they would ask if anyone was new. If somebody was new, they would comment back to them and send them a form. Say, hey, fill out this form. We want to know more about you. We want to help you find your way around the space. Within 3 days, somebody got on the phone with that person. So this is how they created stickiness and appeal, right? Within 3 days, a live human got on the phone with that person and shared with that person, hey, here are all the things that we can do together. The primary thing that happens on a weekly basis, aside from this streamed service, was a small group session where they would do a devotional practice together, either reading from the religious book or whatever. So I learned from that. Here is a very, very large faith-based organization, because, to be honest, religion is the biggest community ever, right? Like that's kind of all the community most of us had for a little while. But they do it masterfully. No matter what you think about religion, we'll leave that aside. It's just taking a page from their community building playbook. They would, so that small group of people would meet on a weekly basis. So when you have a small group of people, you get to know one another, you're on a journey together. And that small group could be something like new moms, recovering addicts, smoking cessation. It could be kids, you could be teenagers. They immediately got people into the intimate space first. That's the first experience they had. Then, when you come into that live stream, if you see people from your small group, you're not alone anymore. You're not just somebody watching a screen. You're there with your people. Masterful community building. I use this as gold standard now. I think it's super important to get people into small, intimate spaces really quick, really quickly.
I would like to know a little bit more about, how does community building intersect with the notions of career? We talked a bit about personal growth, but what can we learn from, both successes and mistakes in this realm? And how can we effectively cultivate and nurture communities within our organizations as well to foster a more supportive and conducive environment for collective development and growth when it comes to career?
This is such a wonderful question. And I have a very fresh experience of this, right? So, moving from organizations that have less than 100 people where everyone knows everyone to an organization that has, I don't know, how many people Meta has at this point in time? 500,000 around the world, like something crazy, right? Um, it was really eye opening. So I was so used to just walking in a room and everyone knows me, right? As well as walking in a room and everyone knows what I'm capable of because they know why I'm hired, what my skill set is. Because you do that thing where everyone goes into the conference room. Yeah, me head. This is her experience. She's here to do this. And you will be working under her. You know that conversation that we've all had in our organizations. That's not how it was at Facebook. And it was a very strange experience to be a small fish in a very big ocean. So, first of all, I think the first thing to understand is there's an ego thing involved with this community building within the workplace. And some of the stuff I'll say might feel obvious if you've worked in larger organizations, but even within smaller organizations, I think some of these things apply. The first thing is that everything is relationships, whether it's large or small. If people need to want to work with you, they don't want to work with you, then you have a problem and your work is not going to get done. So investing from the front end in building relationships with people, one of the good cultural practices that Facebook had, because I had like either had my own startups or worked at other startups or smaller organizations. You're sort of just thrown into the fire and you get to know people as you move along. But you have a grant to write, or you have money to raise, or you have a community initiative to do, you have a training to run. You don't have time to build those relationships deeply before. At Facebook, they said, you're only going to be a noob once. Take advantage of it. And so there is just a culture of coffee chats. You get to know everybody on your team. You get to know everybody on cross-functional teams that are important to you. Get to know people on teams that do things that you're interested in. And when you explain that you're new, people just welcome you with open arms. And I understood why they had that culture around community building and relationship building. It's because you're going to have to get your work done, and you need to be working with these cross-functional teams, especially to get your work done. And B, because the place is so dang big, if you don't have anchors of understanding that can explain to you the way things work, that can demystify things, that can help you move beyond a barrier that you're facing, then it'll really be impossible to do the work that you need to do. So for example, launching a new product, one of the things that I on while was Facebook was launching audio rooms. So basically, they launched this thing called live audio events and a product called Rooms, where we all could meet like this. It's basically a video call, and this came out of the pandemic. And then they launched a version that was audio only. So think Clubhouse, think some of the other platforms that we use. Even people even did it to sort of do like live podcasting, kind of like this, but in audio format. So we did like a go to market for that. And I had to work with the product teams. I had to work with the product managers. I had to work with an external group of stakeholders who were going to be testing the product for us. I had to work with the marketing team. I had to work with the communications team, with the designers. And so we all had to figure out, like, outside of this weekly stand-up meeting where we were talking about progress, how are we going to communicate? Typically that was a chat. Because my job was to work with all these external stakeholders, the service that I was bringing to this group of people was bringing their feedback and like a how might we, hey, have we thought about, oh, this might be a challenge. So I started doing that by pinging people and just having 15-minute meetings with them on video call, and that worked more effectively than anything else. I also realized that the more human you are, the easier it is to work with. Um, I do know a lot of people, and I think it's old style culture, old style corporate culture to have one personality at work and one personality at home. I don't tend to be that person. Now, it's not like my entire private life is on display when I'm at work, but there tends to be like super deep relationships made. And for me, that's true community building, right? Where you feel like you can bring the whole self. I know a lot of us struggle with that in the workplace. And I would say this, it takes one person to do it to make it safe for others. Now, you don't have to be that person. Don't pressure yourself if you're not comfortable. But if you have that craving in your heart, then your higher purpose in being in that space is to show up as yourself so that other people can start showing up fully too. I often think about my work in two ways. The first way is, all right, what are we going to do? You know, what are our goals? What are our KPIs? There's all that stuff. The other is, what is the spiritual service that I'm providing by myself being in the space? How can I serve these people? And how can they, and what am I getting back, right? Because it's a give and take. And the realization that I came to by being at Facebook and Meta was that my sole purpose for being there was to inject love into the system. So in every interaction, in every relationship building exercise, in every bit of feedback, in the way that I show up in meetings, I'm going to come with love. I'm going to try. I'm going to come with love, and that will help to make it safe for us to maybe think a little bit deeper about what our products are doing or whatever. And then, you know, not surprisingly, after having this conversation with a few of my colleagues, all of us realize that we all come with similar skill sets and full hearts, and that's all of our purposes as a team. So that was just like a really beautiful experience. So anyway, I took it to the preachy side, but you know, that's sort of how all of this connects and how it connects back to us in our lives, is that these community building exercises help to define how you show up in the world, and people will step up to that if you are the beacon of light, if you can help to make that first move. And if it's hard to make that first move, even just being receptive and open to something, having those conversations is good. In Bangalore, in the startup scene, there's a culture of no agenda conversations, which I love. We don't always need to talk about what we're going to do together. We can just talk about life. We can talk about what you're doing, what I'm doing. I had one of those last night where a fellow community builder reached out to me who's based in the US. And we both realized, oh my gosh, we're women of the same age, sort of having the same big life questions, navigating around potentially finding new careers. And it was just a beautiful experience. And it, you know, we didn't really have like a list of bullet points, but so I think all of that is really important in terms of, you know, you can only pour from a cup that's full. You can't pour from an empty cup. So whatever you're doing in service in your job, in the world, in life, can only be done if you're feeling fulfilled. And for me, community building helps to fill that aspect of my cup. Then I can go out and give all that energy back.
You know, in the neurodiversity movement, there's this term called masking, that many of us mask our true selves because that's what's taught to us throughout school, in the educational system, even in the professional field, that you have to put out this perfect self in order to, you know, sell yourself or be seen as, you know, a certain way. Because if you're true to yourself, if you're vulnerable, it's kind of looked down upon. Doesn't make sense why that's the case, but you know, it has also taken me a long journey to reach where I can't mask anymore. Like, I'll be myself, and that has brought me a community. Like, the vulnerability, that has, like, you know, resonated with people because people have been looking uh, for those authentic selves, which we don't put ourselves out there. So yeah, my next question is, how can we strike a balance between actively seeking and cultivating connections while also prioritizing authenticity and honesty over these pressures of perfectionism?
Somewhere I feel, the story that you shared, that becomes an inflection point for most of us. Do I choose to show up in this way fully most of the time, right? Or do I choose to continue masking? I don't even think it's just the neurodiverse community that masks. I think everyone masks. We live in a culture where people mask all the time. Some ticket, that's not what's really happening at home. Like, your dog is sick, your mother-in-law is irritating, like, you have a herniated disc, like all of this stuff is happening, like you've taken out a loan, there's EMI. I think that it's interesting to think about this in the place that we sit, and I think there is going to be a little balancing always. The important thing is, and what sort of kept me going in this is, you've got to allow for that time when you're in community. That could fill a lot of people's cup. It doesn't fill everyone's cup. It depends on how you get energy. Um, you have to allow for spaces of silence. And there's this work by Amy Cuddy, right? She talks about power posing, in that now infamous TED talk. Choosing how you're going to show up in any space by managing your energy and sort of acting as if can really work. But those moments are important because you're using conscious reflection. Okay, I'm about to go into this situation. What does this situation call for yourself? A private reflection is super important. And in fact, that space and time to be with yourself is really important. For a lot of super extroverted people, they can't be by themselves. Well, then they never get the space and the time to sort of hear their own voice. They're always hearing their own thoughts and stuff reflected back to them. I think introverts do this so well because they love spending time with themselves or spending time one-on-one. But I think that pause step before entering into any space to see, is it me that's showing up today? Or is it some other version of me that needs to happen for very good reasons? It could be personal protection. And that's not a bad reason to choose to mask in any one situation. I think the other good reasons for masking or not showing up super authentically are because there are toxic elements in that situation. And so you don't want to engage with them. And so they don't deserve your whole self. So you can choose to show up and just be who you are, and that's also fine. Or you can choose to show up and be moderated because it's not worth the energy. And I think just being really conscious about that before you step in and then reflecting after you step in. So I have this post-it note up here. I don't do this exercise often, but it's something that I want to do. So there's a set of reflection questions that you're supposed to ask yourself at the end of every day. The questions are: what gave me joy? What could I have done better? Where did I fall short? Who do I want to be? Because we're all evolving. My authentic self now, a month from now, my authentic self could be really different. I might have turned into some type of mata figure, who knows? And was I being that person? So having a set of questions like that where you can sit in silence and just reflect is super important. And I think, like, lastly, there are always going to be spaces that don't deserve you, that don't treat you well. It's not about you. It has nothing to do with you. And this is like universal advice. It doesn't even have to do with community building. But that's taken me well because, even for the choice of being in the impact sector, I got a lot of slack from my community because I wasn't in finance, or I wasn't a engineer or a doctor or whatever, and I was supposedly a smart kid, and they only saw the beauty of that choice later on. And so I had to live through some uncomfortable moments in community where I was trying to show up in Samaj Seva mode, and they weren't respecting it and they weren't having it. That's not happening now that I've gotten older. But in my early career, that happened a lot. And so I had to choose, especially how I showed up to the Indian community um, in my locality, because not a lot of people were doing this, doing this at that time. So I think back to some of the times that I've been hurt, and now that I frame those questions around it, is it even worth holding on to? No, because not everyone's going to like you or understand you. That's okay. People need to be allowed to not like you or understand you. I think for many of us who are in the community building space or the impact space, we have a people pleasing element to us. And so combating that element and like not fighting with it, but being conscious about it is important. It has certainly has been for me. And you know it intellectually. Oh, not everyone's gonna like me. You know it, but to know it here is harder. And so that distance is also very long. So this is the journey that we all go through, and I think we're constantly evolving there.
This is so true. Accepting that even if you know this in your head, but accepting that is a long journey. But yeah, and also this brings me to my last question, and I think this is a great segue. So there seems to be a gap when it comes to empathy within the social sector. So whilst working for social issues, social causes, care and compassion for our fellow comrades kind of have taken a back seat. So, in this scenario, um, how can communities specifically address this issue, and what specific gaps could these communities, including ours, actively prioritize and strive to fill?
One is a lot of the work that your organization is doing, I think, is making headway in that space. There's this framework, I think, around particular marginalized communities, but I've heard it being spoken about by the Black community in the U.S. And they say, we don't speak badly about our own community because there's already so many other fights that we have with majority communities that we don't want to talk about it. In doing this work, we haven't been honest about the toxicity in organizations, about the toxicity in leadership, um, literally about the utter disregard for people's lives outside of the people that we serve. The stakeholders are doing great. We're serving them with blood, sweat, and tears, but within the organizations, it is disempowering to say the least. That's the nice word to call some of the things that I've experienced in the sector. I don't know how to make a change in a broad way, but I do know that staying silent about it doesn't help. Um, I saw a LinkedIn post about a very famous and well-known community organization. It's an organization that works on communities. The CEO is like big on LinkedIn and like everyone knows them and stuff like that. And another community leader posted their Glassdoor ratings, and they were abysmal. That's why I got curious, because I aspirationally, this is an organization that's been hiring. I know a lot of great people that have worked there, brilliant people in the community space that have worked there. So I looked at their Glassdoor ratings. There was no good rating. Every single rating said that the CEO didn't have any direction, was a megalomaniac. The promotions were based on friendship, that they've lost a lot of good people. And then I understood what I've seen. I was like, oh, these good people were there, why are they leaving? I'd love to have that for our sector. We don't really have that, right? There's no Glassdoor for social impact. At Shiro's, they were building that for companies with a specific lens around women and the world of women. Like, what does it feel like to be a woman working at this company? Is this company respectful? All that kind of stuff. So I saw a productization of this, but I think the first step is us just starting to talk to each other about it. Those of us that are in the space, maybe we don't, maybe we do, but we're not building community around it. And so that could be a really beautiful thing, but it's very difficult to build community and hold space for so many people that need to vent. That's that's also going to be very hard. But I think with trained practitioners, like actual counselors and psychotherapists, this could be really like a really wonderful service to add. I think the second part of this is naming and shaming. Like we still don't want to say bad about the sector. We still don't, and like these are organizations in some cases are getting billions and millions of dollars from institutional funders, and they're killing and crushing their employees. And there's also this dichotomy, right? There's the office workers, the professional NGO level is one subset. That's what's a community unto itself. Then there's field workers. The two meet, but they don't meet. There's like this divide, and so I'd like to see that divide uh, go. One thing I haven't seen is like the ability for the people that are working in the field who are from those communities have some upward mobility to become a person who's in strategy, to become a person in the office. Now, I haven't been in the sector officially in a long time, but I hear that it's still similar. I hear there's some changes. And, Soumya, sometimes this takes a regime change. Um, Gen Z doesn't play about this. They don't mess around. They will not work in spaces that are disempowering, and that might be the change that's needed. The old guard is not going to be around forever. Most of them are in their 70s and 80s at this point in time. And I know that in our sector, people tend to hold on to leadership for a little bit longer. Like there's no retirement, right? But I think that seeing that generational shift, I have hope for the better. But I would love to see us have some transparency and openness about our own experiences in the sector, a little bit more naming and shaming, someone to productize this so that people know what they're getting into, going into it, like what's the good, what's the bad, because we can no longer build for others at the expense of ourselves. Right, that is an imbalance, and what's going to end up is you're going to have a lot of burnt out professionals who leave the sector, raise his hand, because they weren't treated like they were human. So I think empathy starts with openness. It starts with conversation, and it starts with acknowledgement. And when you're not doing any of those things on a larger scale, it's really hard to spread that across. So, start where you are, have these conversations with friends in the sector, talk about the organizations, and some tech savvy person is going to create the space for us to do this openly, and then it's done, and then it can scale. Anonymity could be a really big boon for our communities, because if you're able to speak freely without the fear of getting identified, I think that would be really nice. So, I don't know if there might be spaces for this, and I just don't know about them. And it might be happening on different platforms, and I just haven't tapped into them. But I think like anonymity could be really great. Hey, if you're watching this and you want to build this, come find me. I'll help you. I mean, my parting thought is this: is you mentioned the word healing so many times, and I think what I want to say is that there's the journey of building sort of external community. It's the journey of building internal community with yourself, and recognizing for me, and we didn't go in depth to this. Maybe there'll be a part two. On the healing and the spiritual aspect of the work, but I had to understand where I was traumatized. So I came into this sector being like, I am going to save ... which is the wrong thing. You just, that attitude is taking away people's own power to make up their own minds. I'm not going to save anyone. But I came into this sector with that understanding, or I had that understanding as a younger person, and um, the what was happening underneath was a scream for me to be community to myself. I needed saving. I needed that. I needed someone to come to me. I needed the support. So when I started building that for myself, I started to show up in my work in a very different way. And so I would urge everyone that's doing this work, get a therapist, get a good circle of friends, but friends are not therapists, so make sure that you're not trauma dumping on them. And get a collection of peers that can hear you and can reflect back to you. And then lastly, spend some time with yourself, knowing where you're hurting, how you're hurting, who hurt you, who did you hurt, and why. And think about that before you think you will be able to serve others. Most of us started serving others before we did this work. And so, retroactively, we need to go back and make amends to ourselves, make amends to the people that we came to with our brokenness as humans are. And then, you know, who do I want to be? And am I being that person? And ask ourselves this question every single day. So just leaving us with that parting thought, because I think that that's really important. That's a theme that I thought came up in this conversation without us speaking it out loud, and certainly was so important for my work, my journey, my healing, and my approach in the sector. I had to leave the sector to do the healing, and now I'm ready to come back, I think. So let's see.
We look forward to having you, and see how we can work together and build more, empathetic communities. Thank you once again, Avani, for taking out the time and talking to us. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Do keep an eye out for more conversations of change with women at work.